Daniel Brooks came home after 2 years in military service, smiling as he prepared to surprise the two women he loved most, his wife and his mother. But just a few steps away from the mansion he had sacrificed everything to build, he saw a blind old woman begging on the roadside. At first, he almost passed her. Then he heard her voice, and his whole world stopped. The beggar was his mother. The same woman who once fed him when he had nothing was now standing in the street with a cup in her trembling hand. Who turned her into this? After 2 long years of war, Daniel Brooks was finally coming home. Daniel Brooks was a 32-year-old Black American soldier, a strong and quiet man who had carried pain, hunger, and duty on his back for most of his life. But that day, none of the weight of war seemed to matter. His heart was light. His face carried a smile that had refused to show itself on the battlefield. For the first time in a long time, he felt like a man coming back to life. His loyal dog, Titan, sat beside him in the car, panting softly with its head near Daniel's arm. Daniel reached over and rubbed the dog's neck. "We made it, boy," he said, with a tired laugh. "We made it home." His mind was full of Naomi and Evelyn. Naomi Brooks was his wife, the woman he had loved through poverty, struggle, and shame. Evelyn Brooks was his widowed mother, the prayerful old woman who had given him everything she had, even when she had almost nothing. Daniel could already picture the moment. Naomi running into his arms, his mother crying and thanking God, the house full of laughter, the pain of the past finally over. As he turned into the neighborhood, his chest swelled with pride. Then he saw it, the mansion, large, bright, beautiful, standing tall like proof that his suffering had not been in vain. Daniel slowed the car and stared at it through the windshield. "So it's true," he whispered. "I did it." He smiled, but the smile did not last. Not far from the gate, near the roadside, an old woman stood with one hand stretched out, begging for coins. Her clothes were worn. A dark cloth was tied over her eyes. Her body looked thin and tired, as if life had pressed on her without mercy. Daniel frowned. Something about her made his heart shift. Titan let out a low sound and sat up straight. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Why does she look so familiar?" The woman spoke to a passerby in a weak, trembling voice. "Please, anything helps. God bless you." That voice. Daniel's breath caught. He parked so fast the car shook. Then he stepped out, his boots hitting the ground hard. Slowly, almost fearfully, he walked toward her. The closer he came, the colder his body felt. The shape of her face, the lines in her cheeks, the tremble in her hands. No, it could not be. "Mama," he said, his voice breaking. The old woman stiffened. Her hand shook in the air. "Daniel," she whispered. The world around him went silent. It was her, Evelyn Brooks, his mother, his own mother, the woman who had once fed him from her empty kitchen, the woman who had prayed him through every storm, the woman who had opened her door when he and Naomi had nowhere else to go. Now she was blind. Now she was begging in the street. Daniel rushed forward and caught her before she could stumble. "Mama! Mama, what is this? What happened to your eyes? Why are you here?" Before Evelyn could answer, a woman came hurrying from the mansion gate. Mrs. Jenkins, the housemaid, was a middle-aged woman with worried eyes and a nervous manner. The moment she saw Daniel, all the color drained from her face. "Sir!" she cried. "You're home?" Then she quickly reached for Evelyn's arm. "Come on, Mama Evelyn, let's go now." Daniel pulled back and looked from Mrs. Jenkins to his mother. His joy was gone, his peace was gone. Something terrible had happened in his absence, something wicked, something unforgivable. He looked at his blind mother and whispered, "Mama, who did this to you?" The night Daniel found his mother on the street, refused to leave his mind. But long before the mansion, before the lies, before the pain, there had been another night, a night of rain, a night of hunger, a night when Daniel and Naomi had nothing. 2 years earlier, Daniel Brooks and his wife Naomi were living in a cramped rented room that could barely be called a home. The walls were cracked, the roof leaked when it rained, the kitchen shelf was almost empty. For 2 days they had eaten next to nothing. Naomi Brooks was 28, beautiful and soft-spoken then, a young black American woman whose strength was already wearing thin under the weight of poverty. That evening, she sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the last empty plate in the room. "Daniel," she said quietly, "there's not even flour left." Daniel stood near the window, his jaw tight. "I know. And the landlord came again this morning." "I know." Naomi's voice cracked. "You keep saying you know, but what are we going to do?" Before Daniel could answer, a loud banging hit the door. "Open up!" the landlord shouted. "Open this door right now!" Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. Just 1 second. Then he opened the door. The landlord stormed in with anger already on his face. "I have waited long enough. Rent is overdue again. You two think this is a charity house." "Please, sir," Daniel said, "just give me a little more time. I'm still looking for work." "Time?" the man snapped. "Can time pay bills?" Naomi stood up quickly. "Sir, please, we're trying." But the landlord had no mercy. He grabbed their small bag of clothes and threw it outside. "If you can't pay, get out!" he shouted. "Tonight!" Rain was already pouring by the time Daniel and Naomi stepped outside. Their clothes were soaked within seconds. Their few belongings sat in the mud. Thunder rolled across the sky as if heaven itself had seen their shame. Naomi stared at the street, then suddenly covered her face and broke down. "I can't do this anymore," she cried. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel. Life has defeated us. It has defeated us." Daniel pulled her close, though his own heart was breaking too. "No, don't say that." "What else should I say?" Naomi sobbed. "We have no food, no home, no help. What kind of life is this?" For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Rain ran down his face, mixing with the tears he refused to shed. Then he picked up their bag. "Come with me," he said. Naomi looked at him through wet lashes. "Where?" "To my mother." They walked through the rain to Evelyn Brooks's small house at the edge of the neighborhood. It was old, modest, and worn, but it was still standing. Daniel knocked once, then twice. A moment later, the door opened. Evelyn Brooks, his widowed mother, stood there in a faded house dress, her silver-streaked hair tied back, her kind face full of concern. "Daniel?" she said. Then she saw Naomi, their soaked clothes, their shaking bodies, their broken faces. "Oh, my babies," she whispered. She did not ask questions. She did not complain. She opened the door wider and pulled them inside. Come in quickly." That night, Evelyn warmed water for them, found dry clothes, and cooked the little cornmeal and greens she had left. She gave them the bed and spread a blanket for herself on the floor. Later, when the house was quiet, Evelyn knelt beside the bed and laid her hands gently on them. "Lord," she prayed, "they have come to me empty, but let them not remain empty. Open a door that no man can shut." The following morning, Daniel rose from that bed with fire in his chest and said, "I will not let us stay like this forever." Evelyn, seated at the little table with her Bible beside her, looked up at her son and gave a slow nod. "Then stand on that promise, Daniel. Stand on it, even when the road gets hard." Daniel did stand on it. For days he left the house early and returned late. He knocked on shop doors. He asked at warehouses. He tried loading work, cleaning work, delivery work, anything honest that could bring in money. But every answer felt like the same door slamming in his face. "No vacancy." We're not hiring. Leave your name, we'll call. Nobody called. By the end of the week, his shoulders were heavier, his steps were slower. Still, he said little. He did not want Naomi to see how much fear was creeping into his heart, but Naomi already felt it. One evening, she sat on the edge of Evelyn's narrow bed, twisting the hem of her dress between trembling fingers. "How long can we keep living like this?" she asked softly. "Your mother is feeding us from what she barely has. Daniel leaves every morning and comes back with nothing. I'm trying to be strong, but I am tired." Evelyn, washing a few dishes nearby, turned and looked at her kindly. "Naomi, child, listen to me. Hard times speak loudly, but they do not speak forever." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "What if this is forever?" "It is not," Evelyn said firmly. "God did not keep you alive this far to abandon you now." That night, Daniel came home empty-handed again. Naomi saw his face and did not need to ask. "Nothing?" she whispered. He shook his head. For a moment, silence sat in the room, like another hungry person waiting to be fed. Then Evelyn rose, walked over to her son, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not measure your future by one bad week." Daniel gave a tired smile, but his voice was low. "Mama, I'm trying. I really am." "I know," she said, "and heaven knows too." The next afternoon, while walking past a row of buildings downtown, Daniel stopped suddenly. A large notice had been nailed to a board outside a government office. His eyes moved across the words: military recruitment, able-bodied men needed, training, salary, housing support, service to the nation. He stood still for a long moment. The thought of leaving Naomi and Evelyn twisted inside him. But then another thought rose with it: money, stability, a future, a way out. That evening, he placed the paper on the table in Evelyn's house. Naomi read it first. Her eyes widened. "The military?" Daniel nodded. "It's steady pay. If I get in, I can send money home. Real money." "But it's dangerous," Naomi said at once. "What if something happens to you?" "What if nothing changes if I don't go?" Daniel asked quietly. The room fell silent. Later that night, Daniel knelt alone and prayed. He asked for wisdom. He asked for courage. He asked God not to let fear speak louder than purpose. By morning, his mind was made up. He applied. Days later, the answer came. He had been accepted. Naomi cried and threw her arms around him. Evelyn lifted both hands and praised God with tears in her eyes. For the first time in many months, hope did not feel far away. When the day came for Daniel to leave, he held Naomi's face gently in his hands. "Take care of yourself, and take care of Mama." Then he turned to Evelyn. "Mama, I'm leaving my heart here with you." Evelyn hugged him tightly and said, "God will bring you back to us." Months passed after Daniel left, and the little house grew quieter without him. The first weeks were the hardest. Naomi would wake up and reach across the bed before remembering Daniel was gone. Then she would turn her face to the wall and cry silently so Evelyn would not hear. But Evelyn heard anyway. A mother heard many things. She would rise early, kneel by her chair, and pray for her son before the sun came up. "Lord, keep Daniel safe," she would whisper. "Wherever he is, let your hand remain on him." Daniel Brooks, far away in military training and later in active service, lived a life that was nothing like home. The days were long. The commands were sharp. The ground was hard. The fear was real. But he endured it all with one picture in his heart: Naomi smiling again, and Evelyn never having to struggle for food or rent. He wrote when he could. He called whenever he was allowed. And each time he received his pay, he sent money home faithfully. One afternoon, Naomi rushed into Evelyn's room, holding her phone with shaking hands. "Mama Evelyn," she cried, "the money has come." Evelyn looked up from her Bible and smiled. Praise God. Naomi sat beside her and stared at the screen as if the number might disappear. It's more than I thought. Daniel really did it. Evelyn took Naomi's hand. Your husband is sacrificing his comfort so this family can rise. Never forget what it costs him. At first, Naomi did not forget. She used the money carefully. She bought groceries, she paid old debts, she fixed small things around the house. Then more money came, and more. Little by little, their lives began to change. Naomi moved with care, always updating Daniel on every step. One evening during a phone call, Daniel's tired voice came through the line. How are you both? Naomi smiled. We're good, better than before. I paid the bills, I bought food, and I started asking about land. Land? Daniel repeated. Yes, Naomi said, her voice glowing. You said you wanted us to stop renting forever. I'm trying to make that happen. Daniel laughed softly, pride filling his chest. That's my girl. Evelyn leaned closer to the phone. Son, we are all right. Do your duty and let God keep carrying you. Over time, the dream became bigger. The land was bought, builders came, walls rose, windows were fitted, floors were polished. What had once sounded impossible slowly became real. Naomi stood in the middle of the construction site some days and covered her mouth in disbelief. All this, she whispered, all this from our suffering. When Daniel saw pictures, he showed them proudly to the other soldiers. That's my home, he said. My wife is building it while I'm out here, and my mother is there too. Those two women are everything to me. One of the men laughed and slapped his shoulder. You talk about them every day. Daniel grinned, because I have a good wife and a praying mother. A man is rich when he has that. And for a while, it was true. When the mansion was finally ready, Naomi and Evelyn moved in together. Evelyn remained the same humble, prayerful widow she had always been. She thanked God over every room. She touched the walls and said, This house was built by sacrifice. Let peace live here. Naomi thanked God too. She did. But something was beginning to stir inside her. The large rooms impressed her. The polished mirrors pleased her. The attention from neighbors made her stand a little taller. For the first time in her life, people looked at her with admiration instead of pity. Daniel kept calling. Is everything fine at home? Naomi always answered quickly. Everything is fine. The house is beautiful. Mama is well. We're waiting for you. Daniel would close his eyes and smile every time he heard it. But one evening, after a long walk through the mansion, Naomi stopped in front of a tall mirror. She looked at her reflection, at the rich curtains, at the shining staircase behind her, and something proud rose quietly in her heart. She touched her own face and said under her breath, I am no longer that poor girl. A few weeks after Naomi stood before the mirror and whispered that she was no longer that poor girl, the peace in the mansion began to shift. The house was large now, too large for one woman to manage alone. Though Evelyn still helped where she could, she was no longer young, and Naomi had started to feel that the work of such a grand home was beneath her. One afternoon, she folded her arms and looked around the shining living room. This place is too big, she said. I need help. Evelyn, seated near the window with her Bible in her lap, looked up. Then bring in someone trustworthy. A house grows heavy when the wrong spirit enters it. Naomi gave a small laugh. Mama Evelyn, not everybody carries a bad spirit. I didn't say everybody, Evelyn replied gently. I said choose wisely. Naomi did choose someone at first. She sent word for Imani Cole. Imani Cole was Daniel's childhood friend, a 24-year-old black American woman known for her steady hands, respectful nature, and quiet strength. She had grown up around Daniel and knew what his family had suffered. When she arrived at the mansion with a small bag in her hand, she stopped at the gate and stared in amazement. Lord, she whispered. "Daniel really changed everything." Naomi smiled proudly as she welcomed her in. "Yes, he did. Come, I'll show you around." Imani entered the home with wide eyes but humble steps. When she saw Evelyn, she immediately bent slightly in greeting. "Good afternoon, Mama Evelyn." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Imani, child, it's good to see you." "I'm grateful to be here," Imani said. "Daniel has always been good to people. I'm happy to help his family." For a few days, things moved smoothly. Imani worked hard, spoke respectfully, and made Naomi's life easier. The mansion felt more organized, more settled, but peace does not always leave with a loud sound. Sometimes it leaves through a side door while people are still smiling. Not long after Imani arrived, Naomi reconnected with her old friend, Tasha Reed. Tasha Reed was a woman with beauty on the outside and bitterness hidden deep within. She and Naomi had known each other since their younger days, but where Naomi had once been admired for her gentleness, Tasha had always carried jealousy like a private wound. When she first stepped into the mansion, her eyes moved from the high ceiling to the polished floor to the expensive furniture. "Well," Tasha said slowly, "look at you." Naomi laughed and embraced her. "It's been too long." Tasha pulled back and looked around again. "Too long? Naomi, this is not a house. This is a dream." Naomi smiled, pleased by every word. That afternoon, the two women sat together while Imani served drinks quietly, and Evelyn remained in her room. Tasha leaned closer, lowering her voice. "So Daniel really built all this from military money?" Naomi nodded. "He sends money home faithfully." Tasha raised her brows. "Faithfully, huh?" Naomi frowned a little. "What does that mean?" Tasha gave a careless shrug. "Men who stay away too long change. That's all I'm saying. A man can send money and still send love somewhere else." Naomi laughed lightly. "Daniel is not like that." "Of course," Tasha said quickly, smiling. "I'm just talking." Then her eyes drifted toward Evelyn's doorway. "And that old woman still lives here too?" Naomi looked over. "That old woman is Daniel's mother." Tasha sipped her drink. "I know who she is. I just mean, this is your house now, your life, your comfort. Why are you still living like you owe her something forever?" Naomi's smile faded, just a little. Tasha noticed, and inside she smiled. Before the day ended, she had planted what she came to plant: suspicion, pride, irritation. Naomi did not argue much after that. She simply sat quieter than before, her thoughts turning in dangerous directions. And when Evelyn later asked from across the room, "Naomi, child, is everything all right?" Naomi answered, "Yes, Mama Evelyn, everything is fine." But Tasha, walking out through the front door, smiled to herself. She had seen it clearly. The first crack had opened in Naomi's heart. In the days that followed Tasha's visit, the air inside the mansion began to change in ways that were quiet at first, but dangerous all the same. Tasha started coming around more often, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. Sometimes she would stay so long that even the walls seemed tired of hearing her voice. She always came with flattery on her lips and poison in her heart. "Naomi, you deserve to enjoy this life," she would say, lounging comfortably in the living room. "You suffered too much to still be acting like a servant in your own house." Naomi would smile at first and say little, but she listened. She listened more than she should have. Little by little, her spirit began to shift. She no longer moved through the mansion with gratitude. She moved through it with ownership. She no longer looked at the house as a blessing built by sacrifice. She looked at it as proof that she had risen above her old life, and as pride rose in her heart, patience began to die. One morning, Evelyn asked gently, Naomi, child, did you remember to send Daniel the update on the builder's final payment? Naomi, who was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, did not even turn around at first. I know what I'm doing, she said flatly. Evelyn paused. I was only asking because he likes to know how things are going. Naomi turned then, her face tight. And I said I know what I'm doing. The room went quiet. Imani, who was dusting nearby, lowered her eyes at once. Mrs. Jenkins, the older maid who came during the day to help with heavier work, pretended not to hear. But everyone heard. Evelyn said nothing more. She simply nodded and returned to her chair. Yet the pain of that moment sat heavily on her face. Later that afternoon, Imani found Evelyn alone in her room. Mama Evelyn, she said softly, are you all right? Evelyn gave a small, sad smile. I am all right, child. I am just watching a battle begin. Imani frowned. A battle? Evelyn closed her Bible slowly. Yes, the battle between gratitude and pride. And pride is speaking very loudly in this house. That evening, Tasha came again. She found Naomi in the large bedroom upstairs, trying on a new dress Daniel had paid for. Tasha clapped her hands and laughed. Look at you, Naomi, you don't even look like the same woman anymore. Naomi smiled at her reflection. A lot has changed. Tasha stepped closer and lowered her voice. Exactly. So why do you still let that old woman speak to you like you're a girl under her roof? Naomi's expression shifted. She doesn't mean harm. That's just how she is. That's how she is because you allow it, Tasha said. This is your mansion, your life, your husband's money. Yet every time she opens her mouth, it's like she still thinks she's the head of the house. Naomi looked away, but did not defend Evelyn this time. Tasha saw that and pressed further. You need to set boundaries. Stop letting an old poor woman carry herself like she owns the place. Respect is one thing. But this? She scoffed. This is too much. That night, during dinner, Evelyn bowed her head and said, Let us thank God for his provision. But before she could finish the prayer, Naomi interrupted. The food is getting cold, Mama Evelyn. Evelyn looked up slowly. It will not get cold because we thanked God for 1 minute. Naomi set down her spoon. Everything does not need a sermon. The words fell hard. Imani looked up in shock. Mrs. Jenkins nearly dropped a plate. Evelyn stared at Naomi for a long moment, not angry, only grieved. Naomi, she said quietly, what is happening to your heart? Naomi pushed back her chair. Nothing is happening to my heart. I'm just tired of being treated like I'm still some helpless girl you took in from the rain. The room froze. The moment the words left her mouth, even Naomi seemed to hear how ugly they sounded, but pride would not let her take them back. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Child, I never wanted you to feel small. I only wanted you to stay humble. Naomi looked away. Well, maybe I'm tired of humility. Later that night, when the house was quiet, Evelyn sat alone on the side of her bed. Her hands trembled over her Bible. Tears slid down her cheeks. Lord, she whispered, do not let this home be destroyed. And down the hall, Naomi sat in her beautiful room, staring at the dark window, while Tasha's words echoed in her mind louder than prayer. The following week, the prayer Evelyn whispered in the quiet of her room seemed to hang over the mansion like a warning. But Naomi did not listen to warnings anymore. Something had hardened inside her. The gratitude that once softened her voice was fading fast. In its place stood pride, offense, and the dangerous need to prove that she was now the woman in control. It began with small changes. Naomi stopped asking Evelyn to sit with her in the evenings. She stopped bringing her into decisions about the house. She stopped speaking to her with warmth. Then, little by little, she began stripping away the quiet honor Evelyn once carried in that home. One morning, Naomi stood in the upstairs hallway with her arms folded. "Mama Evelyn," she called. Evelyn came slowly from her room. "Yes, child?" Naomi pointed down the hall. "I want this room cleared out. I need it for storage. You can move to the small room behind the kitchen." For a moment, Evelyn just looked at her. The room behind the kitchen was cramped. It had no proper window and barely enough space for a bed and chair. "Naomi," Evelyn said gently, "I have been in this room since we moved here." Naomi's face stayed hard. "And now I need it for something else." Imani, who had just come up the stairs with folded laundry, stopped in her tracks. "Mama Evelyn can stay in my—" she began. Naomi cut her off sharply. "I was not speaking to you, Imani." Imani lowered her eyes at once. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn looked at Naomi again, long and quietly. Then she nodded. "All right." That was how it happened. No respect, no apology, no shame. By afternoon, Evelyn's few things had been moved to the small room behind the kitchen. And from there, the humiliation only grew. Naomi began giving her chores. At first, it was said casually, "Mama Evelyn, can you sweep the dining room?" Then, "Wash those plates." Then, "Help Mrs. Jenkins with the laundry." Soon it was no longer help. It was labor. Evelyn, a widowed woman who had once opened her tiny home to Daniel and Naomi, when they had nowhere to go, was now being ordered around inside the mansion built with her son's sacrifice. Mrs. Jenkins, the middle-aged maid with a cautious spirit and a kind heart, watched it with growing discomfort. One afternoon, while folding towels with Evelyn, she whispered, "Mama Evelyn, this is not right." Evelyn gave a weak smile. "I know, child." "Then why don't you say something?" Evelyn's hands paused over the towel. "Because sometimes speaking to a closed heart only makes it harder." Tasha, of course, loved every bit of it. She would sit in the living room with her legs crossed, watching Evelyn move slowly with a broom, and laugh without shame. "Well," she said one afternoon, "look at this. The Queen Mother is finally working." Naomi smirked from the couch. "Maybe work will humble her." Imani, dusting nearby, clenched her jaw. Tasha noticed. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "You look like you swallowed pepper." Imani answered carefully. "Nothing, ma'am." But there was something. There was a lot. Imani had grown up knowing Daniel. She knew the kind of man he was. She knew how deeply he loved his mother. And every day she watched Naomi wound the one woman who had once held this whole family together. So she began helping Evelyn quietly. When Naomi was not looking, Imani would take the heavier bucket from her hands. She would sweep one side of the room before Evelyn could reach it. She would save the softest bread at dinner and carry it to the small room behind the kitchen. One evening, as Evelyn sat rubbing her tired knees, Imani knelt beside her. "Mama Evelyn," she said softly, "you should rest. I can finish the rest of the work." Evelyn touched her cheek gently. "God bless you, child. God sees kindness, even when people do not." Far away, Daniel knew none of this. On base, he sat with two fellow soldiers during a short break, smiling as he looked at a recent photo of Naomi standing in front of the mansion. "That's your wife?" one of them asked. Daniel nodded proudly. "Yeah, Naomi Brooks. Beautiful, right? And that house?" Daniel's chest lifted. "Built it for her and my mother. Those two have been through enough." The other soldier grinned. "Man, you talk about your wife like she's a saint." Daniel smiled without hesitation. "She is good to me, good to my mother too." That evening, he called home. Naomi answered on the second ring, her voice sweet and polished. "Baby, I miss you." Daniel smiled at once. "I miss you too. How's Mama?" Naomi glanced across the room, where Evelyn was on her knees, wiping the floor. "She's fine." Naomi said smoothly. Just resting. Everything is peaceful here. Daniel was quiet for a moment. You sure? Naomi laughed lightly. Daniel, stop worrying. We're all fine. He wanted to believe her. He truly did. But after the call ended, Daniel lowered the phone slowly and stared ahead. Then he said, under his breath, Something is wrong in that house. After Daniel ended the call with that uneasy feeling in his chest, life in the mansion kept moving forward, but it was no longer moving in the right direction. Weeks passed, and the change in Naomi became impossible to ignore. Naomi Brooks, once the soft-spoken young wife who had cried in the rain with nowhere to go, now carried herself like a woman who believed comfort had erased her past. She dressed differently, she spoke differently, she even laughed differently. The humility that once made her beautiful was slowly being replaced by something louder, colder, and harder, and Tasha Reed was always there to feed it. One Friday evening, Tasha came into Naomi's room with 2 dresses hanging over her arm and mischief in her eyes. Get up, she said. You're coming out with me tonight. Naomi looked up from the bed. Out where? To a club downtown. Music, lights, drinks, real life. Tasha tossed one of the dresses onto the bed. You've been sitting in this house too much. Naomi frowned. I'm married. Tasha rolled her eyes. Married, yes. Buried alive, no. Daniel is far away. You think he's sitting somewhere shining a halo over his head? Naomi did not answer. Tasha came closer and lowered her voice. Listen to me. Men who stay away that long do not stay innocent. Stop acting like your loyalty is some crown that will save you. Naomi looked down at the dress. A dangerous silence filled the room. That night, she went. The club was loud, crowded, and full of flashing lights. Naomi hesitated when she first stepped inside, but Tasha laughed and grabbed her hand. Relax, Tasha said. Nobody here knows you. Tonight you are free. Free. The word did something to Naomi. At first, it was only dancing. Then it was drinking. Then it was laughing too closely with strangers. Then it became a pattern. One night turned into another. Another turned into many. Naomi began dressing for attention. She started staying out late. Sometimes she came home smelling of perfume that was not hers, smoke that did not belong in her house, and choices she could not explain. Imani saw it, Mrs. Jenkins saw it, and Evelyn saw it most of all. One night, Naomi stumbled into the mansion long after midnight, her heels in one hand, her eyes heavy, her voice careless. She nearly bumped into a table before catching herself. Evelyn was waiting in the living room. The old widow sat upright in a chair, a lamp glowing beside her Bible. Her face was tired, but her eyes were steady. Naomi, she said quietly. Look at the hour. Naomi exhaled sharply. Please, not tonight. Evelyn rose slowly. Then when? When your soul is already too far gone to hear truth? Naomi turned away and headed toward the stairs. I said not tonight. Evelyn's voice grew firmer. Child, sin never enters a house quietly and leaves it peacefully. It destroys. It destroys the one who welcomes it first. Naomi stopped on the first step and looked back, anger flashing across her face. You always have something to say. I have something to say because I still care what happens to you. Naomi laughed bitterly. No, you just want control. You want me to remain small, grateful, quiet, and guilty forever. Evelyn stared at her in pain. That is not true. Then stop judging me, Naomi snapped. Stop watching me. Stop preaching every time I walk through that door. Imani had stepped halfway into the hallway by then, her heart pounding. Mrs. Jenkins stood frozen near the kitchen. Evelyn did not raise her voice. I am warning you because I know what ruin looks like. Naomi's eyes hardened. Then keep your warnings to yourself. She walked upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. Down below, Evelyn closed her eyes. and held her Bible tighter. Far away on the battlefield, Daniel sat with his fellow soldiers under a dark sky, holding his phone after another short call home. He smiled faintly and said, "My wife and my mother, those two women are the most important people in my life." One of the men nodded. "Then keep praying for them." Daniel looked up toward the night sky. "I do, every day." And that same night, while Daniel bowed his head and prayed for Naomi, Naomi was already out there throwing away the very love he was fighting to protect. Later that same week, the warning Evelyn gave Naomi returned to the house like a storm that had been waiting at the door. Naomi's nights out became bolder. She no longer bothered to hide them well. She would leave dressed in expensive clothes Daniel had paid for, spray perfume into the air, and walk past Evelyn as if the old woman's silence meant nothing. Sometimes she came back before midnight, sometimes long after, and each time the house felt less like a home and more like a place where peace had been driven out. That night, rain tapped lightly against the windows as Naomi returned from another outing. The front door opened and she stepped inside with unsteady movements. Her makeup was smudged at the corners. The sharp smell of smoke and alcohol followed her in. She slipped off her heels carelessly and almost laughed to herself as she crossed the living room. But Evelyn was there. Evelyn Brooks, the widowed mother who had once opened her tiny house to Daniel and Naomi in their darkest hour, stood waiting near the lamp with one hand resting on the back of a chair. Her face was full of sorrow, not anger. That made it worse somehow. Naomi stopped. "Again?" she muttered. "You never get tired?" Evelyn's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Naomi, child, I have kept silent too long." Naomi rolled her eyes and tried to walk past her. "Then keep silent a little longer." Evelyn stepped in front of her. "Listen to me." Something in the old woman's tone made Naomi pause. Evelyn looked at her fully. "Do you remember that rainy night?" Naomi's jaw tightened. "I'm not doing this." "I am," Evelyn said, "because I remember it clearly. You stood at my door, soaked, hungry and broken. You had nowhere to sleep, nowhere to go. You were shaking in the cold." Naomi looked away. "I brought you inside," Evelyn continued. "I fed you from the little I had. I gave you dry clothes. I prayed over you when you thought life was finished. You were not too proud then." "Stop," Naomi said, but Evelyn did not stop. "God lifted you from that floor, Naomi. He lifted you, and now look at you. You mock prayer, you dishonor your marriage, you shame the very man who is suffering far away so you can live in comfort. Child, wake up before sin finishes what it has started." Naomi's breathing changed. Shame rose in her, hot and ugly. But instead of softening her, it made her furious. "You think you can talk to me like that because you helped me once?" she snapped. "You think I owe you my whole life because you gave me food and shelter?" Evelyn's eyes filled. "No, but you owe God humility. And you owe Daniel truth." That name hit Naomi like an accusation. "Do not bring Daniel into this," she shouted. "He is already in it," Evelyn said. "This is his home, his money, his sacrifice, and you are wasting it in darkness." Naomi's face twisted. "You want me to remain beneath you forever. That is your problem. You cannot stand seeing me rise." Evelyn stared at her, stunned. "Naomi." But Naomi was too far gone now. "You pray and preach and watch me like I am some sinner under judgment," she said, stepping closer. "I am tired of you, tired of your voice, tired of your eyes on me, tired of you acting like this house belongs to you." Imani had come halfway down the hall by then, alarm written across her face. Mrs. Jenkins stood near the kitchen doorway, frozen. Evelyn lifted a trembling hand. "Child, calm down." That was the moment. Naomi shoved her. It was one hard push, one terrible push. Evelyn lost her balance at once. Her body went backward. Her shoulder struck the table. and then she fell heavily to the floor with a cry that tore through the house. "Mama Evelyn!" Imani screamed, running forward. Mrs. Jenkins gasped and covered her mouth. Naomi stood still, her chest rising and falling, the anger already draining out of her face. Evelyn clutched at the side of her head. "My eyes," she whispered. "My eyes!" The room turned into panic. At the hospital, the doctor examined Evelyn and returned with grave eyes. "The injury affected her badly," he said. "Her blindness may be temporary, but she needs surgery as soon as possible. If we act quickly, there is a strong chance her sight can be restored." Naomi said nothing. The doctor named the cost. Still, Naomi said nothing. And in that long silence, even Imani understood something terrible. Daniel had sent more than enough money, but Naomi was already deciding not to save the woman who once saved her. The morning after the doctor gave his report, the weight of what had happened settled over the mansion like smoke after a fire. Evelyn returned from the hospital, weak, bandaged, and unable to see. The once steady widow who had carried others through hardship now had to feel her way along the walls of a house that no longer felt like home. Her steps were slow, her hands trembled, and every few seconds she would pause, as if still hoping the darkness before her eyes might suddenly lift. Imani helped her into the small room behind the kitchen and eased her down onto the bed. "Mama Evelyn," she said softly, "rest for now. Don't worry about anything else." Evelyn turned her face toward the sound of her voice. "Thank you, child." In the hallway, Naomi stood stiffly, arms crossed, trying not to look moved by the sight, but there was uneasiness in her face now. Not mercy, not remorse, just uneasiness. That afternoon, Tasha arrived. The moment Naomi pulled her into the upstairs room and told her what the doctor had said, Tasha's expression hardened. "So the old woman needs surgery?" she asked. Naomi nodded. "They said if it's done quickly, she may see again." "And how much is it?" Naomi named the amount. Tasha let out a sharp laugh. "For her?" Naomi hesitated. "Daniel sent enough money. I could pay it." Tasha stepped closer at once. "And waste that kind of money on an old woman who has done nothing but make you feel guilty in your own house?" Naomi looked down. "She's Daniel's mother." Tasha's tone turned colder. "Then let Daniel come back and pay for it himself. You are not about to spend all that money because one fall made her blind for a while." Naomi swallowed. Tasha saw the conflict and pressed harder. "Listen to me. God is exposing her too. Maybe this is punishment. Maybe this is what comes from always acting righteous and controlling. Don't let her sickness become your burden." Those words were evil, deeply evil, but Naomi did not reject them. She let them sit inside her. And that was enough. The surgery was not paid for. The days passed. Evelyn remained blind. Soon after, Daniel called. Naomi answered with a practiced sweetness in her voice. "Baby, I was just thinking about you." Daniel smiled faintly on the other end. "How are things at home?" "Fine," Naomi said quickly. "Everything is fine." "And Mama?" Naomi glanced toward the hallway. "She's okay, just resting more these days." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Can I speak to her?" Naomi's throat tightened. She's not around right now." That same evening, while Naomi was upstairs, Evelyn asked Imani to help her find the phone. "I need to call my son," she whispered. "I need to hear his voice." Imani looked toward the doorway nervously. "Mama Evelyn, please." Imani placed the phone carefully in her hand and guided her fingers. Evelyn had barely managed to press the number when Naomi stormed into the room. "What are you doing?" she shouted. Evelyn startled. "I want to call Daniel." Naomi snatched the phone from her blind hands. "You want to tell lies about me?" Naomi snapped. "No," Evelyn said, tears filling her sightless eyes. I want to tell my son the truth." In one violent motion, Naomi threw the phone to the floor. It smashed against the tiles. Imani gasped. Mrs. Jenkins, standing in the doorway with folded towels, froze in horror. Evelyn flinched at the sound, then her shoulders sank. After that day, Naomi's cruelty worsened. Even blind, Evelyn was still told to work. She was made to sort laundry by touch, wipe tables she could no longer see clearly, and sweep slowly while bumping into chairs and walls. When she moved too slowly, Naomi scolded her. Imani and Mrs. Jenkins became her secret support. They guided her when they could. They slipped food to her when Naomi withheld kindness. They whispered comfort over a woman who had given so much and was now receiving so little. Then came the worst of it. One morning, Naomi stood at the back door and placed a cup in Evelyn's hand. "If you want extra food," she said coldly, "go outside and get it." Evelyn's lips parted in disbelief. "Naomi, you heard me." Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward at once. "Ma'am, please." Naomi silenced her with one look, and so it began. Blind and humiliated, Evelyn was forced out into the street to beg before she could eat, while Mrs. Jenkins quietly followed behind whenever she could, trying to keep her from danger. Far away, Daniel kept calling, and Naomi kept lying, but in the present, the lies were finally breaking. Because when Daniel saw his blind mother begging by the roadside, he did not take her back to the mansion. He took her somewhere safe. He placed her in a quiet house, called in the best doctors he could find, and listened as Mrs. Jenkins and Imani finally told him everything. And as Daniel stood outside the mansion afterward, ready to walk through those gates, grief hardened inside him into something colder, something controlled, something dangerous. That same evening, after hearing the full truth from Imani and Mrs. Jenkins, Daniel did something neither woman expected. He became quiet, too quiet. He did not shout. He did not break anything. He did not storm into the mansion in blind rage. The pain in him was too deep for noise. It sat in his chest like stone. Imani, standing near the doorway of the small house, where Evelyn was now resting safely, watched him with worried eyes. "Daniel," she said softly, "say something." Daniel looked through the window into the room where his mother lay sleeping. Her face was calm for the first time in a long while. Fresh bandages covered her eyes. One of the doctors had already assured him that treatment had started, and that there was still hope. At last, Daniel spoke. "She begged in the street," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "My mother begged in the street while I was out there telling men I had a good wife at home." Mrs. Jenkins lowered her head. "I'm sorry, sir." Daniel turned to her. "No, don't apologize for what you did not do. You and Imani helped her when nobody else would." Then he looked back toward the road. "Naomi is going to tell me the truth with her own mouth." And that was why, when Daniel finally drove to the mansion, he did not go in as a man with answers. He went in as a man pretending to still have questions. The gates opened. The car rolled in slowly. The moment Naomi saw it from the front window, she gasped and dropped the glass in her hand. It shattered across the floor, but she did not care. Excitement rushed over her face as she ran toward the door. "Daniel!" she cried. She flung the door open before he could knock and threw herself into his arms. Naomi Brooks, once the hungry wife who had clung to him in the rain, now clung to him again with tears that looked real enough to fool anyone who did not know better. "You're home," she sobbed. "You're really home." Daniel held her, but his hands did not tighten around her the way they once would have. "I'm home," he said. Naomi pulled back and touched his face. "I missed you so much." Daniel forced a small smile. "I missed you too." Inside, the mansion was bright and polished, but to Daniel, it no longer looked beautiful. It looked guilty. Naomi hurried to take his bag. Come in, sit down. You must be tired. I'll make something for you. Daniel stepped inside and let his eyes move across the room. Where's Mama? Naomi froze for one quick second, then she sighed and lowered her eyes, as if carrying a burden she did not deserve. Daniel, she said slowly, I didn't want your first night home to start like this. His heart pounded, but his face stayed still. Start like what? Naomi sat down dramatically and pressed a hand to her chest. Your mother left the house months ago. Daniel stared at her. She what? She had become very difficult, Naomi said, her voice soft with fake pain. She kept fighting me, accusing me, making the house heavy. One day she just left, and no one has seen her since. Daniel said nothing. Naomi continued, growing bolder in the silence. I tried, Daniel. I really tried to live with her in peace, but she was always unhappy with me. I think she wanted me to remain beneath her forever. Daniel watched her carefully. Every word cut him, every lie sickened him. And you don't know where she is? He asked. Naomi shook her head and began to cry again. I swear I don't. I prayed she would come back, but she never did. Daniel nodded slowly. He nodded because if he spoke too quickly, the truth in him might burst out like fire. That night, Naomi stayed close to him, playing the part of the loving wife. She touched his shoulder. She asked if he was hungry. She leaned against him as if nothing had rotted inside her soul. But Daniel did not miss the smell of cigarettes hidden beneath her perfume. He did not miss the careful way she avoided his eyes when he mentioned the past. He did not miss the fear sitting underneath her performance. Then, before the night could pass, Naomi suddenly swayed. She grabbed the arm of the sofa. Daniel, he turned at once. What is it? Her face lost color. Her body trembled. Then she collapsed. Daniel caught her before she hit the floor. At the hospital, the doctors moved quickly. Tests were run. Blood was taken. Hours passed in heavy silence. Daniel sat outside the room with his hands clasped, his thoughts dark and restless. When the doctor finally returned, his face was grave. Mr. Brooks, he said, your wife is critically ill. Daniel rose slowly. What's wrong with her? The doctor looked down at the file. She has multiple serious infections, including sexually transmitted disease and severe damage to her liver and kidneys. The organ failure appears advanced. Daniel felt the floor shift under him. Inside the room, Naomi heard enough to understand. Her secret life had reached the light. Fear swallowed her face. Then the hospital door opened. Naomi looked up from the bed and went still. Standing there were Evelyn and Imani. The moment Naomi saw Evelyn standing in that hospital doorway, the blood seemed to drain from her face. For one long second, nobody moved. Naomi stared as if she had seen a ghost. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes shifted from Evelyn to Imani, then to Daniel. And when she saw the truth in Daniel's face, she understood at once. He knew. He knew everything. Evelyn Brooks stood quietly near the door, supported gently by Imani Cole, the young woman who had helped her when cruelty filled the mansion. The bandages were gone now. Her sight was still healing, but her eyes could see enough. Enough to find Naomi's trembling face, enough to witness the collapse of every lie. Naomi's voice finally broke free. Daniel! Daniel did not move closer. He stood beside the hospital bed, tall, still, and cold, in a way Naomi had never seen before. This was not the Daniel who used to smile at her with open love. This was a man whose heart had been wounded in the deepest place. You lied to me, he said. The words were simple, direct, but they landed with force. Naomi burst into tears. Daniel, please. You lied to me while my mother was blind. His voice rose slightly now. You lied to me while she was hungry. You lied to me while she was begging in the street. Naomi began to shake. I can explain. Daniel laughed once, but there was no joy in it. Explain what? Explain how the woman who opened her door to us ended up outside with a cup in her hand. Explain how my own mother lost her sight and you left her like that. Explain how you stood in that house and told me she left on her own. Naomi cried harder and reached weakly toward him. I was confused. I was under pressure. Tasha kept talking to me. She poisoned my mind. Tasha did not push my mother, Daniel said sharply. The room fell silent. Naomi's hand dropped slowly back to the bed. Daniel stepped closer now, but not in mercy, in truth. Do you remember that rainy night? He asked. Do you remember standing outside with me when we had nowhere to go? Do you remember how ashamed we felt? Do you remember my mother opening that little door and calling us inside? Naomi covered her face and sobbed. She fed us when she barely had food for herself. Daniel continued. She gave us her bed. She prayed for us. She kept us alive when life had broken us. And this is how you paid her back? Evelyn's old eyes filled with tears, but even then there was no hatred in them, only grief. Naomi looked at her with desperation. Mama, Evelyn, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I was foolish. I was weak. I listened to the wrong person. I let bad company destroy me. Evelyn's voice was soft. Bad company can tempt a person, child, but it cannot choose cruelty for them. Naomi cried harder. I know. I have sinned. I have done wrong. Please don't leave me like this. Daniel looked away for a moment, his jaw tight. When he spoke again, his tone was calmer, but that calm was more frightening than anger. I paid every hospital bill. Naomi looked up quickly, hope flashing in her swollen eyes. Daniel continued. Not because you deserve it, and not because what you did can be erased. I paid it because once upon a time, I loved you with everything in me. Naomi whispered, Daniel. But hear me clearly, he said. When you leave this hospital, you will never return to my house again. Never. You sent a blind old woman into the street to fend for herself. You destroyed the home I trusted you to protect. What you did was not a mistake. It was a choice. Naomi let out a broken cry. Imani stood quietly beside Evelyn, her face full of sadness. She did not rejoice in Naomi's downfall. Neither did Mrs. Jenkins, who had come later and stood near the back of the room in silence. Nobody there rejoiced. Judgment was heavy, even when it was deserved. A few days later, Naomi was discharged. She left the hospital weak, thin, and trembling. The sickness in her body had not gone away. The truth had only made it visible. She had no home to return to, no husband waiting for her, no peace left, so she went to the one person she thought would still receive her, Tasha. When Naomi reached Tasha Reed's apartment, rain was already beginning to fall. She knocked with shaking hands until Tasha finally opened the door. For a moment, Tasha just stared. Then she frowned. Why are you here? Naomi's voice cracked. I have nowhere to go. Tasha folded her arms. And what does that have to do with me? Naomi blinked in disbelief. Tasha, you told me. You said... Tasha laughed, and this time there was no pretending left. No friendly smile, no sweet tone, only ugliness. You are still foolish, she said. Do you really think I ever wanted your good? Naomi stared at her, stunned. Tasha stepped closer and lowered her voice. I was jealous of you long before this house, long before Daniel, long before any of it. Since we were young, people praised you, chose you, admired you. Then you got a man who loved you, and he built you a life. I wanted to see you lose it. Naomi's mouth trembled. You ruined me on purpose? Tasha shrugged. No, I showed you the road. You walked it yourself. Then she pushed the door wider, not to let Naomi in, but to point her back toward the rain. "Go," she said coldly. "You are not bringing your misery into my house." And she slammed the door. Naomi stood there in the rain, thin and shaking, her clothes growing heavy with water, her tears mixing with the storm. The night swallowed her cries. There was no mansion now, no husband, no false friend, no pride left to hold on to. She once had love. She once had shelter. She once had family and grace. Now all she had left was regret. This story teaches us that the people who stand by us in our lowest moments should never be forgotten when life finally becomes good. Poverty is painful, yes, but pride can be even more dangerous. Naomi did not fall because she was poor. She fell because she allowed pride, bad influence, and hidden sin to destroy the gratitude in her heart. Evelyn showed the kind of love that gives even when there is almost nothing left to give. Daniel showed sacrifice, loyalty, and trust. But trust must be honored, not abused. This story also reminds us that not every smiling friend wants the best for us. Some people come close not to bless us, but to poison our peace. That is why wisdom matters, prayer matters, character matters. The lesson is simple. Never repay kindness with cruelty, never trade loyalty for pleasure, and never allow outside voices to destroy the home God helped you build. In the end, every choice carries a consequence. Good or bad, it will speak one day. So let us choose gratitude over pride, faith over temptation, and love over selfishness, because a person can lose in one careless season what took years of sacrifice to build. As a creator, I believe this story is deeply painful because it feels real. Not just dramatic, but real. Many homes are not destroyed in one day. They are destroyed little by little, through pride, silence, temptation, bad company, and unhealed wounds. What makes this story powerful is that Daniel was fighting and sacrificing for the family, while the very home he trusted was quietly falling apart. Naomi's downfall was tragic because she was not always evil. She changed. She listened to the wrong voice. She stopped respecting the very hands that once lifted her. Tasha was wicked, yes, but Naomi still made her own choices, and that is what hurts the most. Evelyn, to me, is the emotional heart of the story. She represents sacrificial love, patience, and grace. Daniel represents trust and devotion. Naomi represents what happens when gratitude dies. So I want to ask you, who do you think was truly at fault here? Was it the evil friend? Was it Naomi? Was Daniel wrong for being too trusting and too absent? Or do you think the foundation of this problem started even earlier? I really want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. And now I want to ask you, my dear viewers, have you ever seen a story like this happen in real life before? Maybe not in the exact same way, but have you ever seen a home broken by betrayal, bad influence, pride, or ungratefulness? What happened? And who do you think was truly responsible in this story? Also, for anyone listening right now who is going through heartbreak, betrayal, family pain, rejection, or deep disappointment, I want to pray for you. May God heal every wounded heart. May He comfort you in the places where people failed you. May He restore your peace, your strength, and your hope. May every tear you have cried in secret be answered with mercy. And may God protect your home, your mind, and your future from every voice that comes to destroy what He is building in your life. Amen. This is Mr. Hope, and I will see you in the next video.